I made a mistake. I knew that it was only a matter of time though, because when you have friends as good as mine, they are laser focused and they will not stop until they've gone through all of your videos with painstaking detail, until they find a slip up, in which case they will relentlessly harass you and tell you how badly you've messed up. No, that's not what happened, but one of my friends did bring to my attention an error that I made in my very first video, my intro video, in which I describe our form of government as a democracy. That's not exactly accurate, and we'll get into that into the video. But it is very important to make a distinction between a pure democracy and what form of government we actually have, because there are a lot of issues that we will see and that we will discuss that have to do with what form of government we have and how our government works. Now, I might not get into all the inner workings of government. That would take a very long time, and I'm sure a lot of you would be really bored. So we are going to kind of just strictly talk about the form of government we have, how it came to be, and how it's different from a pure democracy. That way you will be more informed, and you will also be able to have a better framework and a better filter for later discussions that we will have when it relates to our form of government. So don't go anywhere, we will discuss all of it right here. I'm Ben Leach, and this is the Ben Leach Show. Before we begin, I would like to thank today's video sponsor. However, no one's actually paying me to do this, so technically we don't have any sponsors. But I would still like to give a shout out to people who comment on my videos. That way I can still involve you in these videos. These are for you, and by you telling me what you think or what you would like me to talk about, it really allows me to tailor this content to better suit your needs and curiosities. So the shout out that I will give for this video comes to my friend Russell Richardson. He was the one that pointed out that we are not a pure democracy, that I should probably explain the difference to those of you who are confused about what form of government we actually have. So thanks, Russell. I told you I would tell you that this video is for you. Now I know what question you're asking. If we don't have a democracy, then what do we have? Ben, quit dancing around the circle and just be straight with us. I wish that it was a super simple answer, but unfortunately it's a little bit more complicated. I can tell you though that in the most accurate terms, our government can be described as a constitutional federal republic. Boom, there you go. That's the short of it. But what does that mean? In order to really dig into that form of government and how it differs from a democracy, we're going to have to dig into both forms and see the differences. So let's take a look at democracy. The most popular, and what in your mind you might be thinking democracy comes from, is Greece. So Athens had a direct democracy. That means that the citizens of Greece, the people, got together, discussed and debated what ideas, what laws and freedoms they wanted to have, and they voted. It was just simple majority, they win, and that was it. It's a very simple form of government. But the founders of this country knew that there were a couple of issues that come from having a direct democracy. The first one is just logistical. Having to debate and talk about every single law that passes through Congress. Just imagine every single thing that gets passed in a year, not just on a national level, but your state level too. Having all of those pieces of legislation first having to pass through the people. You would not be able to have a job at all because you would just be at the ballot the whole time voting because there are constantly new laws that are come up to vote. So that's not really logistical. That's not really a reality in this country because we're so large. We have over 300 million people living in our country. So realistically, we couldn't have a pure democracy for that reason. But there is another reason that the founders really didn't want a pure democracy. And here's why. You see, a pure democracy means that just the will of the majority is heard, but it doesn't protect any minority rights. For example, let's just say we don't have a constitution, because in a pure democracy, you don't. So there's nothing to safeguard against all peoples, whether that be a religious minority, a racial minority, or any other minority group. Just imagine that if 51% of people could dictate not only what happens in the country, but who is allowed to speak, who is allowed to assemble, what churches are allowed to exist, and what religions are banned. All of these things would be possibilities under a direct democracy because it's just simple majoritarianism. Mob rule is what they thought that it would turn into if we had this form of government. There were inherent flaws in a direct democracy system. So if we can't have a democracy then why do people say that we have a democracy? Why is it so interchangeable? Well, I'll get to that a little bit later. But in order to really get there, let's talk about next what a republic is. Why is that different from a democracy? So the most popular form of a republic that you might know of would be ancient Rome. When they overthrew their monarch, they decided that they wanted to have a government that was representative of the people. But they knew also some other issues with a direct democracy, so they decided to have a body of people that would come and vote on behalf of the people. So the people would elect a representative, and that representative would go to the legislative body. They would debate and decide what would happen, and there you go. That was the law. But another thing was added with a republic that you don't have with a direct democracy, and that is a constitution, a set of governing principles and guidelines that really protect minority rights. You can see that very evidently in the Bill of Rights that we have in our own Constitution. Those are certain inalienable rights that cannot be taken away from government. The founders recognized that there are some things that should be inherent to humans. Not just government giving you these things, but government recognizing that these things should be given to all people, and government should not have the right to take these things away. Now that is how it was originally intended. However, unfortunately, that is not how it was in practice. We can get into that in a later video. But just know the way that it was set up originally was to protect against having government take away those rights from you, and for those rights to be meant for all people. That's how it was written, that's how it's still written today, and how it's put in practice today, that it protects minority rights. So that is really the main difference between the republic and the democracy. How would you really constitute then American government? Because we have some aspects of a direct democracy. We can see that in ballot initiatives where certain states will put a law before the people, and the people can go to the ballot and vote on whether they want that to be a law or not. To give you an example, where I was born in Oklahoma, they just recently, this past year, voted to legalize medicinal marijuana. That was a ballot initiative, so it was put to the people, and the people got to vote to decide whether they wanted that or not. So that, in a way, is a form of a direct democracy because the people got to vote directly on that law. But as James Madison really put it, the difference between a republic and a democracy is really the fact that with a republic, you can have a lot larger of a region of governance. So we can have 320 million people in the country, but still have a working government that is representative of that body through having Congress. We elect our senators, we elect our representatives that are supposed to reflect what we believe and what we want. So they go and debate these things and will pass legislation and write legislation that is hopefully good and benefits you. If it doesn't, then you might want to look at who you're voting for, and you might want to look at voting for someone else if you don't like how your state is run or how the government is run in general. But that's basically the premise. So if we have aspects of a direct democracy and we have aspects of a republic, then how do we put those two together? And then how do we also add another step of the difference between a national and state government? That's where it gets just a little bit more complicated. You see, we have elements of a democracy, we have elements of a republic. So some people just like to put them together and say, boom, we got a representative democracy, enough said. And while that isn't an inaccurate term, it doesn't really fully describe all aspects of our government, chiefly that we have a national level government and a state level government. That's called federalism. We have a division of power between state and national levels. So like I said in my last video, we're not just the United Peoples of America, we're the United States of America. 50 different states, and each state has the ability to make their own laws to govern their own state. Now, everyone has to follow national level laws, but in the Constitution, whatever is not covered by the national government is left up to the states to decide. They can choose for themselves how to govern themselves because each state is in a different position. Not all states have the same circumstances, the same industries, the same reasons that they want to tax different individuals for different purposes. So it wouldn't make sense to govern nationally when each state has its own unique set of circumstances. So they leave it up to state governments. So take the legislature, for example. Nationally, we have Congress, we have the House of Representatives and the Senate. So each state gets representation on population in the House of Representatives, and each state gets 2 senators for the Senate. But your state also runs the same way. You have a state-level House of Representatives and a state-level Senate. So you have both forms that are separate from each other, and they make different laws. So it wouldn't make sense to just say representative democracy because it neglects federalism, which is why the most accurate term lands as constitutional federal republic. Constitutional, we have our Constitution. That's our set of governing principles that guide and direct what freedoms we have and how laws can be put into place, how the different branches of government are supposed to act. So we follow that guideline, the Constitution. Federal, we have federalism, the difference between state and national governments. And we are a republic because we do have representatives that represent us and make laws on our behalf. So that is why the most accurate term for our form of government is a constitutional federal republic. But then why do so many people still use democracy? Well, it's because the founders oftentimes used republic and democracy interchangeably. So it makes sense that so many years later, people are still using these terms interchangeably. And to be honest, we do have a lot of democratic principles. So that's really why people use that term. But the reason I make the distinction between just the word democracy and constitutional federal republic is because accuracy matters in terms of how our government operates. If you just think that we have a democracy, you might have been confused as to why we have things like an electoral college, why we have the Senate, why we have some things outlined in our Constitution. It's because we aren't just a democracy. Now, the people do have considerable power about what happens because we can choose the people that represent us, but we don't have ultimate say because at the end of the day, the people that are signing laws, the people that are debating the laws aren't the people, they're representatives, which means that they have the capacity to misrepresent the people that they're supposed to be representing. So that's the important distinction. And that's why it's important to know what form of government we actually have so that you aren't confused, especially in some of the later discussions, why we have some of the systems that we have. Because if everything's supposed to be governed by the people, then why do we have certain government institutions that we don't even elect these people, but they run our Department of Commerce, our Department of Agriculture? These people run our state and make laws, but we don't always choose those people. So it's important to understand this so that you can understand why we have other systems. So there you go. That is the long story of what our form of government is. I hope that it was not too confusing. If it is, please comment below. Tell me any more questions that you have. I will be happy to clear it up for you. Because again, I want you to make sure that you are going away with the most accurate information possible. Because if you can operate with the most accurate information, it means that you can form the most reliable opinion. And that is really what this channel is about. I've said it so many times and I will continue to say it, that forming your own opinion based on reliable facts and information is very, very important. That is why also you should comment below what else you want me to talk about. What questions do you have about, it doesn't have to just be about government. I know that I've been focusing a lot about civics just because I'm giving you all a foundation for how things work in case you're confused about these things, in case you are just now starting to pay attention and you want to have a good background before we hop straight into current events, but if you have questions about current events, I want to hear them. And I want to be able to tailor my content again to make sure that it is fitting you the best. So do that, share this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and also follow me on Instagram and Parler at the Ben Leach Show. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever part of day it is. Thank you, and I will hope to see you again next week. I will be talking about our two-party system. Why do we have it? And why is it just Republicans and Democrats dominating every single election? We will talk about that next week, so be sure to tune in for that. Other than that, that's all I got for you. I'm Ben Leach. Have a great day.